For many families in Gaza, grief never truly ended. It simply waited beneath the rubble. Nearly 3 years after one of the deadliest strikes of the Gaza war, thousands of Palestinians gathered this week for a mass funeral unlike any other. The remains of 112 people, including dozens of women and children, were finally laid to rest after being recovered from the ruins of the Sabra neighbourhood in Gaza City. Well, many belong to the same extended Hassayna and Abu Sharia families whose lives were torn apart in a single night. For those attending the funeral, it was not just a burial. It was the end of an agonizing wait that had lasted for almost 3 years. Well, the victims were killed during an Israeli strike in November 2023 that flattened residential building in Sabra. More than 300 people are reported to have died in that very attack. While some bodies were recovered in the immediate aftermath, many remained trapped beneath layers of collapsed concrete because simply continuous fighting and the lack of heavy equipment made rescue operations nearly impossible. In fact, only recently, after recovery teams spent more than 2 weeks carefully digging through the debris, the remains of 112 victims were finally found. The funeral procession saw rows of flag-draped coffins placed side by side as relatives gathered for prayers before carrying them through the streets which are still scarred by the war marks. For many families, it was the first time they had been able to say goodbye. Perhaps the most heartbreaking part of the tragedy was not only the loss itself, but the years of uncertainty that followed. According to accounts from grieving families, many spent every day wondering whether the remains of their loved ones would ever be found. In fact, one resident described the overwhelming emotion of finally seeing the recovered remains, saying they simply wanted to hug whatever remained of the family member they had lost. Well, that single sentence captured the unimaginable reality of families who had waited years without a grave to visit or a funeral to attend. In many cultures, funerals offer closure. In Gaza, that closure was postponed for many years. Now the saddest part is parents never had a place to mourn their children. Children grew up without knowing where their parents were actually buried. Brothers and sisters carried photographs instead of memories of a final farewell. Now hundreds and thousands of mourners gathering for what Palestinian authorities called one of the largest mass funerals of the Gaza war. In fact, you can see in the visuals rows of coffins stretched across open ground before being carried towards newly dug graves. For many survivors, the funeral reopened wounds they had spent years trying to live with. Relatives spoke of losing entire branches of their families overnight. Some households disappeared completely. Others were left with only 1 or 2 surviving members. In fact, one survivor said the memory brought back every painful memory of that day, reminding children and elderly relatives alike of the family members who never came back. Well, grief is difficult enough when there is certainty. But for the thousands of families across Gaza, uncertainty has become another form of suffering. Recovery teams say many more people are still believed to be buried beneath destroyed buildings. Limited access, damaged infrastructure, and shortage of heavy machinery continue to slow search operations. Every excavation raises hopes for one family, while it reminds another that their loved ones is still missing. For rescue workers, each recovery is painstaking. Identification often depends on fragments of clothing, jewelry, medical implants, or distinguishing physical features because many remains have deteriorated after years beneath the rubble. Well, every recovered body represents not just another casualty, but another family finally receiving an answer. Wars are often measured through statistics, casualty figures, destroyed buildings, and military operations. But funerals like this remind the world that behind every number was a person with a family, a home, and a life interrupted. The rows of small coffins belonging to children stood beside those of grandparents and their parents. Entire generation of the same family were buried together. And for relatives and kins, the funeral was not just about politics or military strategy. It was about restoring dignity of those who had waited years beneath the ruins. As prayers echoed across the cemetery, many mourners said they had finally been given the opportunity to fulfill one of the most basic human acts, burying their loved ones with respect. Yet even as ceremony ended, it also served as a painful reminder that countless other families across Gaza are still waiting for that same moment. For them, the full-scale war has not truly ended. It continues every day when they wake up, hoping that somewhere beneath the rubble, they may one day find enough of their loved ones to at least say a final goodbye. Well, with that, it's a wrap on this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm Yash Goel signing off for Times Now Digital. Until next time, take care and keep watching this space for more such videos.